You're tuned into the hottest paranormal life show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
UFO. By true UFO, I mean those which cannot be explained as misperceptions of what we today call natural phenomena. If the answers behind the true UFO phenomenon ever become known, the UFOs and the related aspects, such as abductions, could become the commonly accepted natural phenomenon of tomorrow. In the future, perhaps, commonly understood and accepted natural phenomena might include visitors from outer space, visitors from inner space, visitors from the future, visitors from the past, visitors from other dimensions. Perhaps some could turn out to be mysterious life forms which have shared our planet for eons, and upon affecting our conscious and unconscious minds, take various forms adapting to our differing times and cultures. For example, elves, fairies, greys. More sinisterly, some could eventually turn out to be so-called cyclotronic holographic-like projections at the hands of a black-budgeted government project. By the way, it was revealed only 2 days ago about the radioactive cloud experiments that occurred over LA and Nevada in 1965. Perhaps the true answers will lie in some, all, or none of these hypotheses. Third Eye Productions was formed in February 1993 to provide a form of communication and exploration of ideas and facts dealing with the true UFO phenomenon as well as other mysteries. We hope, as do you, to hasten the day that the real answers come. Tonight's presentation will be by retired airline executive Mr. Bill Caulfield. He is a UFO investigator with over 45 years of experience. His program, the Great UFO Enigma, which includes over 200 slides, promises to be extremely informative and fascinating. If time permits, a question and answer session will follow his presentation. In addition, there will be a short break at around 8:30. Third Eye Productions and Lawrence would now like to welcome Mr. Bill Caulfield.
How many people in this room think they're abductees? Anybody? I was at a thing a while back and somebody asked that and 5 people came up on a stage. Well, you never know. But to give you an idea why I think things have not changed in the UFO field in the last 45 years, I'm going to read a little letter to you. It's real short. How many of you ever heard of Don McNeil, the Dope Breakfast Club, many, many years ago? Some of the older people have. Well, this letter was written to Don McNeil back February 3rd, 1955. It says, during your visit to California on one of your broadcasts, I heard the tail end of the story told about a man from another planet, flying saucers, and so forth. Now, Mr. McNeil, I am thinking of making a change due to world conditions, taxes, awards, etc. Please send me information on the following. It's from Mrs. W.W. Pate, the El Rancho Sanatorium in Glenwood, Texas. Not a shame. We get the same stuff today. Well, let's just go on into the slide. I think it'll get more from that than anything. Will you turn on the slide, Victor? This is the, let me get this thing set. Can y'all hear me now? This is the Andromeda Galaxy. Anybody that looks at this and looks at the star system out there and thinks that we're all by ourselves must be out of their mind. But as I go along tonight, you're going to think that I'm very negative on UFOs and ETs. I've heard people say, boy, this guy doesn't believe that ETs exist. Well, I really do. But I'm going to give you a lot of negative stuff tonight. And for me to tell the truth, I have to come out with the negative things, okay? This guy here is the one that started the term flying saucer. When I first got involved in the UFO field, that's all we heard was flying saucer. There wasn't no such thing as UFOs. I think that Dr. Alan Hynek was probably the one that started UFO philosophy. But he saw that he just up on radar, and he called it flying saucers. Just the name was stuck, flying saucers. I'll get used to this key in a minute. Now I'm going to show you some American UFOs. These were taken by George Stock in July 1952. That's a three photo series there. This was taken by an officer HM on the S7 Ramsey back in 1957. This is an enlargement of the same photo. This is taken by William Rhodes in Phoenix in 1948. And I'm not going to show a tremendous amount of these kind of slides. I just want to get you off on the right foot and show you some of the old stuff that was back there in the old years. This is an enlargement of the one taken by on the Ramsey. This is another enlargement. This was taken over San Francisco by a fellow named Joe Kirsten. Now, if you note, this one was taken over Seal Rock about the same period of time. Seal Rock is in California, out by San Francisco. Notice how similar they are? This is what they call the flying teacup. Whether it's actually a UFO or another fake photograph, you never know. This was taken by Rex Helfand in Riverside, California. This is Riverside, California. This photograph here was taken by a fellow down in Albuquerque, New Mexico. His name is Paul Villa. I went down to visit Paul one Sunday afternoon. I spent the whole day with him. One of the nicest guys you ever met. He lived in a trailer house outside of Albuquerque. This is common no shoe. The ground saucer research, when investigated these photographs, said they put them under analysis and said they were fake. They said there's nothing could be this perfect and not be a fake. Good logical reasoning. Everybody in the country has stolen his photograph. They're still using it today. And I know a lot of you looking at the board over there, you see a whole set of those photographs that he took. Nothing going backwards again. This is the old Lubbock lights, taken by the Texas Tech professor down in Lubbock, Texas. This is back in 1956. This is the lenticular cloud. Many, many times over the last 20, 30 years, people have seen these and thought they were UFOs. And Air Force planes are going out and checking. Same thing with this. This is a skyhook balloon. Many Air Force pilots have chased these. This is supposed to be an ET. It's a shaved monkey that two kids tried to put off as an ET. Well, I'll tell you one thing, the razors were sure dull, weren't they? This here was, one party said this was taken in Cologne, Germany, another one said it was taken in Mexico City. But this is supposed to be a little ET between two Secret Service agents in Mexico City. You notice there's quite a bit of difference to it than a monkey. You see any similarity there? Everybody knows what this is, the abominable snowman. And here's something that, when UFOs first got started, back many, many years ago, they had what they call angel hair. Every time a UFO was sighted, it had some angel hair or something fall out of the sky. And this is where they sent samples of it. You don't hear any more about it today, just in the old context. This man and woman says they're from another planet. They're called Princess Nyota and Princess Ugona. I just put it in there because maybe they are, you never know. And another thing to prove is nothing changes. The girl's name is Daryl Neiman. She says she's from Venus. She showed up at a conference back in 1960 out in California, and this was a hypnotherapist out there that was interviewing her. But in the 1990s, the girl on the right, her name's Onek Onek, says she's from Venus. And she showed up at one conference in LA. And again, from Venus. In the early years of UFOs, you know why I'm doing that? I have one of these things, and the buttons are just the opposite, force of habit. This guy here is a very close friend of my wife's man. His name was John Otto. He was one of the first original UFO researchers ever come down the pipe. That light he has in his hand is what he called a black light. He used to go out in Lake Michigan, outside of Chicago there, with his black light and try to make contact with UFOs. John went around the country, sponsored all the old-time UFO contactees like George Adamski and George Hunt Williamson, and then on the podium. You can't see this too well. It's the front of a book called Passport to Eternity. I don't have a slide of the guy's face. His name is Larry Foreman. I'm going to tell you a little story about Larry. And every once in a while I'm going to stop telling you a story about some of these people because I think it's very important to listen to them. Because what I'm going to tell you later is going to make you think. Larry used to go out rock hunting. He lived in Los Angeles, out north Hollywood. One night out there, he said he was sitting by his campfire, and he heard somebody walking up by his campfire, and this guy came up and started talking to him. He said they became very close friends over a period of several days. And eventually, one time he went out there and met the guy again. The guy told him he was from another planet. He gave him a lot of information. He told him how he could contact him later on. Larry said the way they contacted him, and I've been sitting in Larry's home and talking to him about this, and his wife is scared to death of stuff. They're both deceased now, but they were scared to death of it. Larry said he'd be sitting in his living room, and boom, a light would come on the wall, and writing would come on the wall and tell him what to do, where to go. His wife said every time she saw that writing come on the wall, she'd leave. She'd get up and leave the room. He said one time they told him to come out in the desert. Now Larry was a real estate agent, very, very level-headed guy, one of the nicest guys you can meet. That's the amazing thing about these old contactees. They were all nice people. Larry said they told him to drive and take off a certain road and drive right into the mountain, which he did. They set up an image for him of a mountain there, and he drove right through it. One time he was out in the desert with these people. 6 ships landed. They sat out there for 3 hours. They all conversed. He had meetings with a whole bunch of them and stuff like that. They told him, and now what I'm going to say to you doesn't necessarily mean I believe all this, okay? These are stories. And I want you to understand, I'm telling stories. What I believe may not coincide with what I tell you. They told him they had a Project Milana that they wanted to tell people about. Project Milana was where the ships were going to come down here to Earth, and when we went through this big crisis on Earth, they were going to lift the people off Earth and take them to the ships. So the planet settled back down. Now, Larry had been told this. I'm going to take off my coat, it's so hot up here, if you don't mind. Larry had been told this is straight truth. Because Larry is the type of guy, if you met him, you know he wouldn't lie. I don't think he did. But the writing on the wall has happened before. It's in the Bible, remember. But is this guy telling the truth? Or some of these other guys telling the truth? Who knows? This guy is Albert Bender. Albert Bender started the 3 Men in Black, and a lot of you that read stuff on UFOs have heard about the 3 Men in Black. I remember one time I was up in New York at a conference, and Al Bender was there. And he started talking about 3 Men in Black and the things they were going to do and this and that. And half the people in the audience were scared to death. But he is the one that really started the whole 3 Men in Black theory. It's still going on today. I was up in Lincoln, Nebraska in April, They had a guy run around in dark glass and everything, impersonating the guy in black. This guy here was a good friend of mine. He's an old UFO buff. His name was Gabriel Green. This is his wife. I knew Gabe before he married her, and she died a few years after they got married. Gabe ran an organization called ASCA, Amalgamated Flying Saucer Clubs of America. In 1960, he ran for president. He ran on a ticket of prior choice economics. The last time I saw Gabe Green, he used to live up in Northridge. He's still alive today. He was sitting on the floor in a lotus position talking to his dead wife. In fact, John Otto was with me at the time when I saw him, and John said, "Let's get the heck out of here." You know, but he may have been the man of the truth. You never know. Mike Barton and his wife. Mike Barton is Michael X. If you ever read any of the books from Michael X, this is Michael X. My wife and I were sitting in the restaurant one night with him and his wife, and another couple of Mike started telling about an astral trip he made. Everybody in the restaurant could hear him. Now this was a very plush Los Angeles restaurant that we were in, and it makes you kind of squeamish, whether it's true or not. This is George King. George runs the Theory Society. First time I met George, we had a thing out in California going. I lived out in California. I flew out of there for a couple, 2-3 years. It's called the Cosmic Console Center. The whole idea of the Cosmic Console Center was to get the information on UFOs out. George would come in and tell about all these different trips he made, what he was doing, so on and so forth. This girl here was also in the Cosmic Console Center. Her name was Gloria Lee. Gloria was a very good friend of mine. One time while we were in the Cosmic Console Center, and I got pretty heavy in the Cosmic Console Center. I made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I think that was one of them. But Gloria was always hearing voices. Well, she was getting voices from Jupiter. One time the voices told her to take all the money out of the Cosmic Console Center treasury and have printing done with it. She took it all and went down and had all different kinds of porn printed up because she took her voice and told her somebody's going to steal the money. I asked her, I said, "Well, Gloria, what did you do that for?" She said, "Because my voices told me to." Later on, her voices told her to go to Washington, D.C. and get the UFO story out to the government. And to push and push and push, which she did. She was told to go on a hunger strike. She went on a hunger strike. By the time her husband got to her, she died of malnutrition because she listened to a voice. Howard Mentor. Howard is still involved in the UFO field. He's quite a bit older than that right now. That picture there was taken back in the 50s or 60s sometime. This is a UFO model that Howard built. He says he was contacted by the space aliens, and they took this picture one time from his backyard while the space alien was walking up to this disc out in his backyard. You notice the bell-shaped type disc there? And Howard played with a lot with free energy. He had one time he was testing a workshop he had on the back of his house with free energy, where it went right through the roof of his garage. And that's no big secret because they're trying to do it today. This is Buck Nelson. If you're from Missouri, you've heard of Buck Nelson, Mountain View, Missouri. I went down to visit Buck one time. He said he had a contact with extraterrestrials, so I went down to his place down in Mountain View, Missouri. I had the toughest time of my life finding his farm. He said it was Buck's ranch. It was Buck's jungle. He was 10 miles off the nearest road. When I got back there, I couldn't find him. I honked my horn and everything. Couldn't get any answer. So I went through the gate, and here was this guy standing out in the middle of the field working on an outhouse. Thought I might walk up to him, so I started talking to him. And he told me he was Buck Nelson. He started telling me about his story. He said he went to Mars, Venus, and the Moon on the UFO. He was building the outhouse because he's going to have a big UFO convention down there. Buck had a dog called Bucky that they took with him on the UFO trip. They let him fly the ship. Now, again, are all these people nuts? And again, I'm just telling you stories. Okay? Buck was one of the nicest guys you could meet in your life. I remember one time he came out to California. Gabe Green invited him out to talk to his conference out there. And Buck had his overalls on, just like this. He was dressed almost identical to that. So Gabe Green was not going to let, in those days, you know, it was a little different. You didn't come to a meeting just in a shirt and pants. You wore jackets and so on and so forth. And Gabe wasn't going to let him talk. And so Frank Strange, the one who got Gabe inside, said, hey, you got to let the guy talk. So let him talk. But he said he took that trip to Mars, Venus, and the Moon, flew the ship. And he was talking about this until the day he died. That shot there is a picture that he took from his backyard. I saw the two discs. He said that after the third try, the third time they came to his house, they landed. This is Truman Bethram. Truman again was contact. Now, if you notice one thing I've talked about, I haven't talked about any abductees. I've talked strictly about contactees. And there's a big difference between contactee and abductee, in my opinion, which we'll get to later. He said he was a contactee. He said he was contacted, taken aboard a ship. This is a drawing by a woman called Ora Raines. They took him on a ship, took him for a ride in space, the whole bit. This is George Van Tassel and his wife. George leased 33 acres out of Giant Rock Airport, east of Los Angeles. They'll fly and talk to conventions there every year. At one time, they claimed they have 15,000 people attend the UFO convention out there at Giant Rock. George met the space people. That's a crowd at Giant Rock. That's another crowd at Giant Rock. That's a picture of Giant Rock itself, and you can see the podium they built out there with a ladder going up to the top of Giant Rock. This is the doorway that goes in underneath Giant Rock where there's a little office. And that's the office there at Giant Rock. At one of the conferences out there, this cloud formation came up and everybody swarmed down to see UFO. Could have been. But George was told to build this. It's called an Integratron. Now, when you look at this, look at the amount of money that this guy put into this money and time. Okay? That's a picture of the outside of the door that was painted. There is after it was painted a fence. A lot of money for somebody to take a judgment, somebody from outer space telling you to go out and build this thing. That's the roof of the Integratron from inside. That's a centerfold. The whole idea of the Integratron, supposedly, was that you got inside the thing, and through some motion or other, it energized your body, revitalized you. As of the last time I checked, the Integratron is still out there, as it was in their other form. Giant Rock itself, the government got out there and dug underneath it and plowed dirt in there and filled up the hole. Tore down all the fences except the fence around the Integratron. So you go out there and ride your motorcycle around any place now around the Integratron. I don't know who owns the Integratron now. Probably the government took over the land. This fellow on the left is a fellow named Dan Fry. The fellow on the right is Orfield. I'm not going to talk about Orfield. Although said he had contacts, he was space people too. And he wrote some good book, couple of good books on it. Dan Fry was an engineer, and I'll tell you a little bit about his story, because I think it's very interesting. He just passed away about a year ago. He was an engineer working in White Sands, New Mexico. He said one Sunday afternoon, it was July 4th, he said the air conditioning in his tent busted down, so he decided to go out for a little walk. He walked out in the desert for a ways, and he saw this disc sitting on the ground, which I'll show you a drawing of here. Well, first off, let me show you these slides he made. This one slide he made up, and there's another slide. This is the second most used slide in UFO field today. But this is a drawing of the ship that Dan said he came into. He started walking up on the ship and started to touch the guy. Said, don't touch it. He said, it's hot. So he said he backed away. He said the voice kept coming to him. He never met anybody. But the voice said, Dan, he says, how would you like to take a ride? He said, are you serious? He said, yeah. So I said, okay. So he opened the door, a door came open inside this disc on the passenger compartment down there in the lower left. Dan got in, there were 2 seats in there. He said he flew to New York back in less than 30 minutes. Now Dan again, he's a very logical-minded guy. He's no kook. Now did he go for a ride or didn't he? He said he made light patterns, tried to tell the government about all this stuff, and they wouldn't believe it. Later on, Dan met a party off of this ship that was controlling this remote control disc. He said his name was Alan. Alan told him a lot of things about the atomic wars and stuff like that that we're going through, and so on and so forth. He wrote 2 books that you probably get if you go to your public library. I doubt if you can get them in bookstores now. They're probably White Sands Incident and University. But I talked to Dan a few years ago. After the we were sitting there having a cup of coffee. He said, Bill, he said, you know, it's been so long since I had this contact with this UFO. He said, I'm not even sure it really took place. And I think the reason he said that is because he's more disappointed than anything. He lost his credibility. It was tougher to get a job, which happens to most people in the UFO field went through this stuff many years ago. This next one, that's a picture of John Otto, the guy I talked to you about a little while ago on the left. The fellow next to him with the glasses is Reinhold Schmidt. That's the other one's handicapped in a wing and a-hole. Reinhold Schmidt is the one I want to talk to you about because he's close to home. One Sunday afternoon, and again, another story. Okay? And I know Reinhold Schmidt better than I know anybody in this room except my wife. Reinhold Schmidt was one of the nicest guys I've ever met. Very quiet-spoken guy. He said one Sunday afternoon, and I don't know why all this happens on Sunday, but it does. One Sunday afternoon, he was up in Fringe, Nebraska, driving out looking for grain. He was a grain buyer. He said, as he was driving down a dirt road, he said an object came over the front of his car, went over the fence, and on the other side of the sand dune. So he said he became curious, he got in his car, got out, went over, climbed over the fence, walked over the top of the sand dune, and there on a dry riverbed was his disc parked there. And I'm sorry, I don't have a slide of the disc. I have a drawing of it at home. But he said he was scared to death. He said he walked up by a tree and stood right behind a tree for a few minutes until he got his courage up. Then he walked up and said hi to this guy, and the guy said hi back. He said, talk to him like he was talking in German. Reinhold said that he asked him, he says, do you mind if I go inside your ship and take a look at it? The guy said, no. He said, go ahead. So he walked inside the ship. He said, inside the ship there's 3 big long vials of liquid, different colors. He said, there's people in there working at consoles inside the ship. None of them even talked to him. Didn't say hello or boo to him or whatever. He said he was in there 4 or 5 minutes. When the guy that was outside came in and said, Reinhold, I'm sorry, you're going to have to leave. He said, we have to take off now. He said, but we'll contact you later on. So Reinhold said, fine. Watched as the ship left. He went into town and he couldn't decide what to do. He finally decided to go to the sheriff. Big mistake. They kept him for 3 days. They put him in every type of questioning imaginable. And Reinhold told me, in fact, one day I was out at Gay Greenhouse. He told us, he said, worst thing I ever did was report it to the police. He said, they didn't believe me. He said, they interrogated me like I was a criminal. It's all they did was have an experience. So, anyway, they told Reinhold they again, contact him again. They did a couple times. In fact, one time they contacted Reinhold. They told me, hey, there's some crystal mines at a certain location, you ought to buy them. So Reinhold went out and bought these crystal mines. He started selling interest in the crystal mines. He sold some to some ladies. Reinhold liked new cars and ladies. But he didn't know how to handle money. Some of these women that were interested in Reinhold had put money in his venture on the crystal mines. He squandered the money, not intentionally, but just by accident. One of the gals got mad at him, filed charges against him, he wound up back of it. Prior to that, though, he was taken, he met the UFO people supposedly. They took him over to the pyramids in Egypt. Have any of you ever heard the story? I can't believe that nobody's ever heard this. See how many good old stories of the 60s are out there? Reinhold said that they took him over by the Sphinx. And this may blow some of your mind. I don't want anybody to get up in the back row and leave, as I saw him do one night when Reinhold was lecturing on this. He told what they told, stop on underneath the Sphinx, and they just got up and left the room. He said that they landed out a little distance from the Sphinx. They had a car on board the UFO that they got in. It said it looked like an MG. They drove to the Sphinx. This being took him down below the Sphinx into a room. Took out a little, something like a pencil flashlight, but he said it wasn't a pencil flashlight. Shined it on the wall, and the door stood open. He said, Rhino, this door has not been opened in 2,000 years since I closed it. Inside, he said, was a cross, crown of thorns, a lot of manuscripts, scrolls, things like that. He was in there, said it wasn't musty or anything in the room. They left. He came back and he started lecturing about this. Boy, that was a big mistake, because nobody would believe it. I was at Gay Green's house today. He came back from the trip to the pyramids. And Gay Green and I were sitting there talking when Rhino knocked at the door. And after we talked a little while, Gay said, Rhino, how come you stop by today? He said, I just want to tell you about my trip to the pyramids. Just as casually, you know. This is another one of Reinhold Schmidt with some officials out at the site of Kearney, Nebraska. This is the site where the disc landed out there. This is Reinhold with Gloria Lee and Dr. Frank Strange. I'll talk more about Dr. Frank Strange later. This is the father of UFOs, supposedly, George Adamski. And I'm not going to talk a lot about him because there's so many books been written by him. And actually, George did not write the books. This fellow here, Desmond Leslie, wrote the books for George. George filled him in. George said that he met, this is a drawing of a person called Orthon. That in his UFO contact out there back in the 40s and 50s, that he met this here person called Orthon. She told him a lot of things, gave him a lot of different prophecies, what's going to take place, and so on and so forth. George lived at the base of Mount Palomar, what's called Palomar Gardens. He took pictures through a 16-millimeter telescope. And with one little disc coming off the moon, there's 6 discs coming off the moon. There's one closer up, and that's a bell-shaped ship again. There's the undercarriage of it. There's 2 more shots of it. Now there's 5 discs supposedly coming out of the mothership. You can see the cigar-shaped ship down there. I got a letter about 10 days ago from a fellow back in someplace in Michigan, I can't remember the city. They told me, he said he was on the FDR aircraft carrier back in the late 50s. He said he got a letter from all the crew members confirming what he saw. He said a cigar-shaped ship came up next to the FDR along with other sightings that it had. And he said they could see a row of windows along the side of the ship and people inside the ship. And he said he's got a letter from the rest of the crew member verifying all this. Now, I haven't corresponded back with him yet. There's another cigar-shaped ship with 6. You see the one bell ship on the lower left there, kind of shaping up to what it's supposed to be. And there's that cigar-shaped ship and another photograph there. There's an artist's concept of a field ship with sending out a small ship. Now, Reinhold Schmidt, George Adamski's photos have been authenticated by experts, believe me, and they've been torn apart by experts. Again, it's, you have to believe it's on. I only met George once. I think he was an honest guy. Of course, my wife said I think everybody was honest. So I didn't know. That's another drawing of a scout ship. This is an artist's conception of a U.S. drawing of a ship that the U.S. was going to build. And if you don't think the U.S. is not involved in UFO building today, you better get out and find out how the world's going. Because they are building out of Area 51. The Mitchell sisters. I met the Mitchell sisters in Kansas City when I met her the first time. 2 Mitchell sisters, and I'll tell you a little story about them. Lived in St. Louis. One day they were in a restaurant in downtown St. Louis having lunch, and two men came up to the table, started to talk to him. Asked if they mind if they sat down and had a conversation with him. And remember, people weren't so scared that day to have somebody sit down at the table with you as they are today. So they said, sure, they let the two guys sit down, they started chit-chatting. And after a while, the two beings told them they were from outer space. And you know how that goes. Yeah, so on and so forth. But then they said the names was Elon and Zealous, the names of two entities. That they wanted to talk to them and tell them some things about Earth and what's going to happen. They asked if they could meet them again. They said, oh, sure. They get left and they talked to their families about it. But they kind of dropped the subject. But later on, they met them again and had another conversation. Then one day, Helen was by herself, and one of the, I can't remember which one of the aliens met her, after said, we'd like to go for a ride. She said, sure. By that time, they were pretty friendly with each other. So they took her out, took her on the ship, took her into outer space, let her fly the ship. It must be simple flying from the way it sounds. They told her a lot of things that they wanted her to know about. They told her mostly about atomic and hydrogen bombs and radiation. They told her the effects of radiation. One thing they told her that makes the story about that, I'm going to tell you about ETs today, the abduction. They told her that after them would come negative ETs in our atmosphere. They would have only one thing in mind, and that was to conquer and control. Now remember, this was said back in 1957. Did they know back in 1957 we were going to have the abduction and the ET problem that we have today? Maybe not. Maybe they just made it up. But again, if you met Helen and Betty Mitchell, hey, they're like your good old buddies. If they were lying, they had no reason to lie. They had nothing to gain. When I saw them here, first time in Kansas City when they lectured here, they had about 20, 30 people at the lecture. They didn't make any money on it. But these ETs told them that these ETs that were coming after them were the fallen angels. Now again, I'm telling a story. What you believe is up to you. And they said that they would deceive the very unwary. And the whole idea that they want to conquer and control us. Which sounds very possible. I can't talk on this guy too long because I spent 6 to 7 years checking this guy out. 3 years one time I dropped, 3 years went back to 3 years. How many of you ever heard of gasoline made in the water? Or water made into gasoline? There he is. And believe me, he did it. Give you an example. Well, first let me tell you how I met the guy. My office was at O'Hare Airport. And one morning a guy came and said, hey, Bill, he said, I knew you do UFO research. There's very few people in my business knew I did UFO research. He said, I met a guy last night that wants to talk to you. He wanted your telephone number. He said, I wouldn't give it to him. But he handed me his telephone number. He said, he wants you to call him. So I called him. He said, well, will you meet me someplace? I said, sure. He said, well, meet me at Lutzmeyer's down in Addison, Illinois, at such and such time. I went down there. We sat there drinking beer. I wanted to hear about UFOs. He wanted to talk about gasoline. So one thing led to another. He told me, he said, well, I know more about UFOs than you think I do. He told me that he can make gasoline out of water and make it burn. I said, oh, yeah, I've heard all that sort of stuff before. So eventually he made tests for me. He put water, a little bit of pitch powder in water, mix it up and pour the water into the lawnmower and the lawnmower run. He did some tests at his house with the milk bottles. Dumped the stuff out on the ground, burnt the leaves, set the milk bottle down on the table like it. After about 15 minutes, light a match with the flame to shoot up 15, 20 feet. Anyway, a multi-millionaire had gotten involved in this before I got involved in it. And he wanted the spaceships. I'm not going to tell you what his name is. You'll find it out sooner or later anyway, but I'm not going to tell you. They said one night they're sitting on the veranda of his house up in Michigan. One of these ships that these entities had built in connection with this fluid. And they built 6 ships in abandoned coal mines. The Guio had, that's how he got the fuel. They used the fuel to take these ships off the ground. There was an entity attached to this cave where they were at that were making these ships. They gave them the technology to make the ships. The German doctor had come over here. thousands and thousands, in fact millions of dollars in gold bullion after the First World War. That's how they got started. I went down to Southern Illinois with him because I wanted to find out something more about the spaceships. I spent a lot of time on it, believe me. He took me down to his Aunt Tilly's house. I didn't go out to the coal mine because they were abandoned at that time. They took me out to his Aunt Tilly's house, and out in the backyard, there's no cistern, with old concrete out there. And you know how old concrete was in 1925. You can tell it's so low. And they had a picture of a spaceship drawn in there with 1925 underneath. He said that they built these spaceships under the control of this ET. They lost 5 of them in outer space. The one was still flying. The story is so unbelievable. The multimillionaire, and this was told to me by a guy that worked for this multimillionaire. He said, Bill, he said, I thought I was going to be fired. They set up the spaceship in the land in this guy's backyard. He'd taken the whole fire department in his plant, put them in a 5-hour meeting so that they could take the spaceship on land and put it in the firehouse. Nothing happened. Danny said, Bill, he said, I thought I was going to be fired. Because nothing took place. But the story is so long and involved, I just tried to hit the highlights on it. The guy just died here about 5-6 months ago. And my wife and I used to call him our lovable con artist. Because he was always trying to make a buck and sell that fuel and sell the shit. One thing that I found out about all the old UFO contactees, in fact, it sticks with the present day abductees too. The old contactees, practically every one of them, after they had a contactee, had a problem. Some kind of trauma came up in their life. You know, nobody's going to get the keys to the kingdom. But anybody wants to find out anything about old Guido Fringe and his gas station, just go to the Luzmeyer bar up in Addison, Illinois. Ask the bartender, he'll probably tell you the whole story. Because there's enough people around Addison, Illinois that know it. Since those come from Venus, I think we better change our slide tray back there. I'm going to take and go into what I call it the new age of UFOs. That's here? No. I'm going to talk about the age of UFOs. Is that better? Okay. What I've been talking about is basically contactees are pre-1960 people. Now, you have to look at this thing one of two ways. Either all those people prior to 1960 that were contactees have met people like you and me, didn't make deals with them, were just told stories, saw their ships, so on and so forth. Are they all lying? If they are, fine. We're just going to abductees and live with what we have today on the abductee situation. I don't think they were all lying. I think some of them had to be telling the truth. I think that something happened in the early 60s, probably 1961, and that may not be an exact year, but as close as I want to come to it, where we went from contactees to abductees, and we went to these two people here. This is Betty and Barney Hill. A lot of you read the incident, I think called the incident at Exeter, with Betty and Barney Hill. They were coming home on Sunday night, again Sunday. Maybe these guys don't work on weekends. One Sunday night, and they saw an object in the sky go over the top of their car, and they stopped and tried to investigate it and didn't find out anything. They went on home. They started getting illusions or something happening to them. So they went to a hypnotherapist. Under hypnotherapy, they found out that they were taken aboard the ship, operated on, implanted, so on and so forth. But what really happened, and then that is when you went from contactee to abductee. Why? Now, if you go back and you look at the UFO field, there's a couple of cases out today where they have contact with people. I call them humanoids. Out in LA when I was talking out there, you say, oh, there's Nordics, whatever you want to call them. This is a drawing that Betty Hill made. This is the entities that she saw under hypnosis. I talked to Betty one day. We were having coffee. I was out in Phoenix, Arizona. And I asked her about her story. She said, Bill, she said, if you want to see some UFOs, she said, just come up to my place in New Hampshire. She see them all the time. She said, they fly all around the place all the time. She says, in fact, I have a direct telephone from my house to the Air Force base. Betty and Barney started the abduction hypnosis theory, in my opinion, in the U.S. and around the world. Here's another abductee, Betty Andreasen. She had a book written on her story, and this is her husband, Bob Luca. They've both been abducted. Betty says that she was abducted at 2 o'clock in the morning. She was floated through the wall of her home, taken to a UFO or ship someplace, at least she thought it was a ship, put on an operating table, operated on, had an implant put in her, and taken back to her home with a veil over her mind so she couldn't remember any of this. And I talked to her, I said, well, what do you think of them? She said, oh, they're very nice entities, very benevolent. Anybody that takes me at 2 o'clock in the morning is not benevolent. I don't care how you slice it. They're just not. Everything they do is covert. I just think they have a good sales ability. But if you look at it, they were abducted against their will. They had something implanted in their mind or up there. Some of them go up their nose with these implants, some go through the ear, some go through the mouth. But the implant usually winds up in your forehead or some way or another. But they always operate in the dark. This y'all heard about, back Kathy, you probably saw the movie. Travis Walton. Travis, that's Fire in the Sky. Now you ring a bell with you? The movie where all the cocoons and everything were in. Travis openly states that he can only remember 2-3 minutes what happened to him up on that mountaintop that guy day when he was there with the other 6 guys. He walked towards this light and things went haywire. He said he could remember 2-3 minutes of it. And then the next thing he knew, he was back and laying there, kind of beat up and so on after his 3-day loss. I'm totally against movies like Fire in the Sky. Hey, take your little kids and see Fire in the Sky. Scare the devil out of them. That scare the average adult. The little people being born in cocoons and things like that, and slide down hidden passages. And Travis says he didn't know why he made the movie. Oh, I know why he made the movie. Very simple, money. Calvin Parker. One of the nicest guys I ever met. Calvin Parker was with Hickson on the Pascagoula thing that you probably all read about years ago, where the 2 of them were abducted from the bank of the river down Pascagoula, Mississippi, taken up into the ship. Calvin Hickson went out and told the world about the story. Told what happened next. Calvin was either scared, he had fear, or what, but he didn't talk about it about 8-9 months ago. He's probably one of the most honest men I've ever met in the way he relates things. He said that when he went up and was taken up off this river bank, was taken in the UFO, he said they were trying to operate on him. He said they were trying to stick a rod up his rectum. He said he revolted. He said he was taught by his dad that when he didn't like something, he fought back, and he fought back good. So he said he thought that this was a female that was operating on him. So he said, I can't hit a female. You know, this is what he was taught for. He said, but the heck with it. He said he smashed her in the mouth. He said she went up against the wall and her mouth started bleeding and left the room. Calvin is one of the few abductees I know that have openly stated that he thinks these ETs today that we're messing with are evil. Most people think they're either benevolent or just benign, you know. Cortell. The fellow on her right is Bud Hopkins. Bud's a artist out of New York that does hypnotherapy work. Probably one of the most popular in the UFO field today for doing hypnosis. Linda Cortell, her real name is Linda Napolitano. She lives in Brooklyn, New York. She lived on the 12th floor of an apartment building down by the Brooklyn Bridge. She said the one night she was abducted by UFOs. She said the light came in her 12-story window. She looked out, and it was a beam of light, and the UFO had been in the beam of light. She saw these three aliens coming down the beam of light. The next thing she knew, she was being sucked up in this beam of light, taken up by these three beings up into the ship. The ironic thing is, this could be proven, you could bust the UFO story wide open. She said, Bud Hopkins said that they found out that there was 3 men in the car down below the apartment complex that night, headed for a small airport there. One of them was Dog Show. The other two were Secret Service agents. They saw witness this whole thing. So many things happened this after the fact. Of course, Dog Show is not going to admit this. He won't even admit being around. Even most of your UFO people today won't even mention his name because of that. The two Secret Service agents, if they were Secret Service or private police, whatever they were, at one time abducted Linda Cortell. Took her in her car, tried to find out from her what was really going on. And she said she thought they were scared to death. They threatened her, everything. One time she jumped out of the car and ran. And this is going on today. They wrote a book about it. And Bud Hopkins has said recently as well, there's a lot more coming out on the Linda Cortell case. We're going to have to wait and see what it is. I know what's coming out of the Linda Cortell case. Big, big book. This is Christy Tilton. She lives in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Said she was abducted by UFOs. Nice lady. She says that she was abducted by UFOs and taken to a place called Dulce, New Mexico, or an underground base in Dulce, New Mexico, where they operated on her. She saw different genetic experiments that they were doing in these underground facilities, a whole bunch of other things. I always wonder how she could have known she was in Dulce, New Mexico. I've been to Dulce. In fact, I flew through Dulce. My wife and I were heading down there. I wanted to go down and investigate Dulce because the underground place they have there, supposedly. And I was driving so fast when I went through Dulce, I didn't even know I was going through Dulce. The only way you can tell you're there is they got a water tower that says Dulce on it. You don't see that. You don't see Dulce. I'm going to show you pictures of Dulce a little later. But if she was taken to Dulce to an underground base, how would she know she's in Dulce unless somebody just said, hey, you're in Dulce? I think that a lot of abductions today, and there's people that are in it, I don't know if there's anybody here that works in the hypnotic field or not. I think it's power suggestion. I think it's implanted memory. Many things that can cause it. I'm not saying that ET contacts are real. Don't get me wrong now. That's one thing I said out in California. He doesn't believe ETs are real. I believe they're real, but I believe a lot of it's a bunch of baloney. This is the lady, it's Resort in Russell, Kansas, has a case over there. This is Dr. Scott Porter. He was involved in the case. That's the mother-in-law and sister. And this is Marcia Brockman and myself in my younger years. This is an angel in the park that they beat up because of the case. This was a Japanese film team, all but the lady with the blue stripe with the blouse. Came over from Tokyo. I met him at the airport out of KCI. I took them over to Kansas. We spent 3 days together. Well, what a wild 3 days. They filmed everything that was moving. We went past the base out here at Manhattan. Only two of them talked English. And you can imagine me in the car with a bunch of Japanese people, the whole language they're using is Japanese. And I said, there's a military base down there. That guy stuck that camera out the window. And he did that for 3 days. It was a lot of fun in a way. But during that 3-day period, they made a whole documentary, which I portrayed part of it, but I've never seen it because it was never released on public television. She has memories of being abducted from 40 years ago. She says she's still being abducted today. She's on a lecture, she's writing some books now, she's writing some children's books on abductions, how they can keep away from them. She said that her last abduction was a sexual encounter with a alligator type looking entity. Very, very nice lady. Carla Turner. Carla Turner is probably one of the most level-headed gals I met in Kentucky. Her and her husband. This is her husband, Casey. I enjoy talking to the two of them because both of them have been abducted. At least they claim to be abducted. But they're down to earth on it. They talk common sense when they're talking about abductions. Well, we've been going here for about an hour and 15 minutes, so let's take about a 10, 15-minute break and we'll get back to it, okay?
And please fill out the mailing list at the front table outside the door so we can inform you about future events. Thank you. And anytime Mr. Caulfield is ready, we'll start again.
Somebody said they couldn't hear, so I figured I'd take this thing off the thing and hold it. I did a little thing before we got started here. I put a little tab, a white tab, a little one of those stick-em things, under 5 shares. I wrote a little book called UFOs, Deception and Danger. Anybody's got a tab underneath their share gets one of those books. It's a little pull-off sticker, one of those typewriter stickers. Don't tear the place up. Yeah, you got one right there. Just hang on to that thing. Give it to Gil in the back outside. Later on, he'll give you one of those little booklets. I'm glad I didn't put 50 of them out there. Okay, oh, we still got some more coming in. Can you hear me in the back now? Is that better? Yeah. Good. My wife just chewed me out. She said, I can't hear you. I'm going to talk on hypnosis and mind control. People that are in the hypnotic field today. I think it's one of the most dangerous things we're doing in the UFO field today. You can take and go out, this little flyer here came out, Hypnotherapy Certification Weekend. In fact, a friend of mine went to it for $379. You go to St. Louis, you have a 20-hour course. When you come in, finish that 20-hour course, you not only have business practices for how to get people to stop smoking, so on and so forth, how to get them to lose weight, but you also are a certified hypnotherapist, and you put people under hypnotherapy. Bad, bad, bad news, in my opinion. I know people that are doing hypnosis today that have not had 5 minutes of training in it. I know people that are advertising for abductees because they want to put them under hypnosis. There's people that are trying to do hypnosis on children now. And to me, that's one of the worst things I think we could get into. Hypnotherapy is not a proven thing today in reality, in my opinion. In fact, 2 people that were abductees were put under hypnosis out in California by a fellow that I know. He has 2 lawsuits going now because they said that he really screwed up their lives. He said that he convinced them that they were abductees.
I think a lot of the abductees today and what comes out of hypnosis is implanted memory. And you implant memory in a lot of different ways. The government's doing it now. The government's got a lot of mind control programs going. It's restored memory based on suggestion. It's basically the same things you have going with all this here children cases today, and sexual assault and stuff like that. It's coming out. There's a lot of it that's in the mind of people, and it's not reality. That's not saying that some of the UFO abduction cases are not true. There's something in the UFO field today, when you get in the abduction end of it, that's missing. I don't know what it is, and believe me, nobody else in this world knows what it is. Just one missing thing. This fellow here is Dr. John Mack. He's with Harvard University. Very, very well-educated gentleman. Has a lot of credentials to his name. He's written one book, and he's just come out with another one here recently. I cannot believe that the guy would be doing abductions in the UFO field today. It's just not worth it. The credibility is not there. This is Bud Hopkins. Bud is a New York artist. Bud got into the hypnosis field by accident. He's probably the most well-known hypnotherapist in the UFO field today. He's the one who's doing all the hypnotherapy on Linda Cortell. He did it on, well, he's written a couple of books on it so far. And I think you'll see another one coming out on the Linda Cortell case. This one doesn't come out too clear because of the lighting. This is John Carpenter from Springfield, Missouri. John is a clinical psychologist doing a lot of hypnotherapy. He has dozens and dozens of abductees that he's putting under hypnotherapy all the time. This guy here speaks to aliens using people to relay messages to the Earth. This came out in one of the tabloids. Dr. Leo Sprinkles with the University of Wyoming. Again, very well-educated gentleman. I went to a lecture of Leo Sprinkles out on the plaza here 8, 9 months ago. Close to the end of his lecture, he asked for if there was anybody that thought they were an abductee in the audience to come up on the stage. 6 people came up on the stage, claiming that they thought they were abductees. Leo Sprinkle went into a trance, and he started speaking through some real gruff, real voice, talking to these people. And to be honest with you, I was ashamed that I was in the audience. I was ready to leave. You know, when you get people like this, with this kind of background and the credentials that they have, that put themselves in those kind of positions, there's something wrong. There's got to be somebody influencing somebody someplace on the thing. It makes you wonder if these people are doing the right thing to the abductees, or they should be left alone. And I think that your abductees are being damaged by it. I think that if you take and keep, I don't know of an abductee now that hasn't had some kind of trauma in their life because of an abduction by an ET. And later on I'm going to tell you what I think you ought to do when you get involved with an abduction or an ET, even if it's close to thinking you're in one. In the UFO field, like in a lot of other fields today, you got effects on, the 2 biggest effects that you have in the world today on with the UFO field and our present civilization is religion and economics. They're the 2 biggest, have the 2 biggest effect on those 2 things. But in the area of religion or cults, whatever you want to call it, and I think the biggest problem that the UFO field has today is that they may be labeled a cult. And if they're labeled as a cult, you're going to see me shut up shop and go away. This guy here, very dangerous man in my opinion. His name is Benjamin Creme. Anybody ever heard of Benjamin Creme? You read some of his materials? Maybe I shouldn't have said I think he's a very dangerous man, but I think he is. Benjamin Creme says he is in contact with the ETs. Okay, the ETs are giving you messages that they're channeling information to him. Benjamin Creme is out to promote a person by the name of Lord Maitreya. I'll show you a little slide here of Lord Maitreya. Right there. Lord Maitreya is supposedly living in the Arab community in England right today. Many years, not many years ago, about say 8, 9 years ago, Benjamin Creme and his organization called the Terra Foundation ran full-page ads in several of the major newspapers across the country saying that the new Christ for Earth has returned, and that was Lord Maitreya. Supposedly, Lord Maitreya, you know, we live in a Judeo-Christian world today, and we're just tearing our thinking apart by attaching some of the stuff to the UFO field, whether it's real or whether it's not real. I just don't think we should mess with it. But Lord Maitreya said that he's the new Christ. When the time is right, he's going to come back, do whatever he's supposed to do. The contacts that Krem has with Maitreya are via channeling. And I think some of you know what channeling is. Channeling is where you're taking, a voice comes into your mind and so on and so forth. They put out a publication called the Emergence Newsletter. Comes out every month. And you're going to see him hit the news again here before too long. Now, no big joke. If you think this is something that's just a mythical, or somebody talking over here doesn't know what they're talking about, Lord Maitreya has sat in on many UN conferences. Ironic, isn't it? And still he doesn't come out in the open. A lot of you can take and add two and two together and you can figure what this is going to come about. Here's another fellow, Ray L. Any of you heard about Ray L? There's one back there. Ray L, his name is Claude Valorian. He's a Frenchman. He's living in France right now. He has an organization that claims about 30,000 people. I'd love to have an organization of 30,000 people give me $1 a month. I'd give up UFO research real fast. Ray L preaches free sex. He's building a landing pad in France right now for the UFOs to land. He said he's in contact with UFOs. He said he went aboard a UFO and met with Christ, Buddha, and Muhammad on the UFO. See what I mean? Hey, whether the guy's telling the truth or whether Lord Maitreya is telling the truth, makes no difference to me. Keep it out of the UFO field. I don't think you need to mix the two. I remember at the UFO booth out at Expo West a couple of years ago, Rail had a lot of gorgeous looking women out there. So he's got the money, he's got the girls, living in France. That's the Rail sign up there, the six star, pointed star sign. And that's the booth that they had out there. This is Michael and Aurora L. Legion. They put out a monthly publication on information they get that's coming from space people. They get it through channeling. Very nice people. You talk to them and they're just as charming as can be. The funny thing about it is most of the information I've read that the L. Legion has put out, it doesn't come to pass. This is Michael Turry. I took this picture, about a year ago of Michael. He's probably supposed to be the best astrologer out. The picture got all blurred. I don't know what happened to it. He said he's 99.9% accurate in his forecast. I asked him, I said, well, are we going to have an atomic war? He says, no. I hope he's right. He sells forecasts for the complete year, astrological forecasts, things like that. And boy, they are expensive. I can see why he's talking the way he is. You can't see this lady here either. Her name is Tuella. Tuella channels the Ashtar Command. And I know a lot of you probably heard about the Ashtar Command because it's pretty heavy around Kansas City with some people. The thing that amazed me about the Ashtar Command, and I'm going to tell you what it's there for, supposedly. The Ashtar Command is supposed to be floating around in our outer atmosphere with thousands and thousands of ships to land here and take the people off this planet when we go through this big catastrophe, what it is, whether it's an earthquake or whether it's something else that takes us and starts destroying us. The amazing thing about the Ashtar Command, and I used to take and kind of knock it, but I'm getting to the point now where I say, hey, you never know. I think back what old Larry Foreman said about his Project Milana and the ships being out there, and that was 30, 40 years ago. So you have to look at everything. This is a book that she wrote. In fact, she wrote 2 other books besides this one on Earth assignment. And this tells about what they're supposed to do, what you should do, and so on and so forth. It's interesting to read. If you can, go to your bookstore. They'll get it for you. It's just interesting reading. Believe me, you won't want to put it down when you start reading it. It does not necessarily mean it's the truth. You have to keep an open mind if you're going to mess around with stuff in the UFO field. If you don't, you're going to get bombed. The Ash Star Command has a couple of big compounds, one out in Utah and one in North Carolina. And I wrote the fellow in North Carolina a letter several years ago, and I told him, I said, I wrote Twella a letter and sent her a lot of questions that I wanted to answer for her. I told him, he said, she didn't answer me. He said, well, maybe if you would have sent her a 29-cent stamp, she would have answered you. What's ironic is about the Ash Star Command. I'm going to tell you a little story about 1960. I shouldn't tell you this, but I'm going to anyway. At this Cosmic Console Center that I told you about, I was head and foot, and believe me, in 1960, that was 35 years ago, I didn't have all the answers to the UFO story. So I made a tape up, a real-type tape, to be played at one of the meetings of this here Cosmic Console Center because I was going to be flying that night. Then something happened, I didn't have to fly, and I went to the meeting anyway. And the fellow that was living in the house told me, he said, Bill, he said, after you finish that playing that tape, he says, keep it going. He says, there's a message on the end of it. So I kept it playing, and I set the tape up on the fireplace. It was there during the whole time until we put it on the reel to be played. If somebody snuck it out, and they must have snuck it out, put this voice on there. But the voice came through, and it was Ashtar. And he told about a way of life and the way you should live on Earth and so on and so forth. I thought it was ironic. This is the Phoenix Journal, another channeling publication that comes out. This is Cosmic Awareness Communications. It's channeling and esoteric material that comes out. Now I'm going to talk to you about hidden bases in the inner Earth. A fellow down here asked me about them during the intermission. And as you can see, I'm going through some of this fairly fast. I can only hit on the highlights of some of it so you don't get the full story. If you want to learn something about hidden bases around the world, go to a bookstore, ask them to order this book for you. They can find it if they want to really find it. If you can't, holler at me and I'll take and give you a bookstore down in Arkansas that sells everything. This book also tells you about the Dulce thing. It tells you about the inner Earth theory. And I'm going to bring up a thing about the inner Earth in just a second. Admiral Byrd, when he went to the Antarctic, or the Arctic mainly, went into the center of the Earth. I have a log that Harley Byrd sent me. And I'm going to read a couple of things out of it for you. Or just a couple of notes what happened on Admiral Byrd's from this log. Now, Harley Byrd is a nephew of Admiral Byrd. In fact, I met Admiral Byrd's niece many, many years ago. She was in our house when we used to live in Chicago. And then Brad Steiger and his wife were trying to write a story on her. But Harley goes around the country today, talks about UFOs. He had a UFO experience, but he worked on Project Blue Book for about 6, 7 years in Washington. He's very much attuned to the Washington system. He is an articulate dresser, very, very impeccable in his way he dresses. He's a very nice-looking guy. He told me about Dulce, New Mexico, and gave me some information on Dulce, which I found out was wrong. But anyway, Admiral Byrd, and this is what comes out in the little pamphlet I have that Harley gave me. He said Admiral Byrd flew directly north when he was in Antarctica back in 1947. They took a 7-hour flight. He said they went 1,700 miles beyond the North Pole. When they got there, they saw mountains first. He said then they saw a crystal-type city. The controls in the airplane were taken over by somebody else. They couldn't control the airplane. They were landed. When they got out there, some entities came up and talked to them. Now, this is all in Admiral Byrd's diary, okay? They said that these entities spoke in a kind of a German language. It sounded German, but it wasn't actually German. He said they took him in and said, we want you to come and talk to the master. He went in and talked to this person. He said it was a very, very polite gentleman, elderly gentleman. he told him about what the Earth was doing. He said that they didn't want to come out from the center of the Earth, where they've been living for centuries and centuries, until we set off atomic and hydrogen bombs. He said then they had to come out and see what was going on. Then they flew these discs out of the center of the Earth, which could knock your whole outer space theory on UFOs right down the drain, couldn't it? He called these things, I can't even remember the name of it, but anyway, he said that inside the Earth there was a central sun, which is 600 miles across in diameter. On each side of the best way to, what he explained it, if you took an orange, okay, and punched a hole right through the center of the orange, in one end and out the other, and then took the guts out of the orange and all you had was a peeling. The peeling of the orange would be, or the Earth would be 800 miles in diameter. Then you go 2,900 miles to the sun, 600 miles to the sun, 2,900 miles to the other side, and 800 miles. The opening at both ends of the pole were 1,400 miles. Now if you can just vision that, that's what he said it's like. He said they live in there in a grassy city. He said that when they were flying in there in their airplane, they dropped down to 1,000 feet. They saw what they thought was some kind of an animal. When they got down on the ground, they thought it was a mammoth. But they said it was a beautiful, beautiful place. Admiral Byrne, what he got, and he said he called it the land beyond the poles. He said when he got back, he was told by the federal government to keep his mouth shut because of national security and so on and so forth. And there's a lot more to it. The biggest thing that they had to tell Admiral Byrne that came out in what I read in fact, the diary stopped after he made his contact with his master. And then he picked it all up from memory and wrote the stuff after that. Well, and what they call these ships were flugel rods, flugel reds or something like that. But there's been other stories about holes in the center of the Earth, that there's an inner city inside the Earth. Mr. Swenson and his son sailed around. It's like if you had a donut, and the donut was, the top of the donut was a hole, and it was a concave, and you go right into it, you sail right around the inside of the Earth, right out to the South Pole if you went in through the North Pole. This is a slide from a little pamphlet that Harley sent me that he made up. And that Land Rover they had was a huge thing. In fact, they carried an aircraft on top of that Land Rover. They lost their Land Rover in a crack in the ice. This is Bill Hamilton. Bill does a lot of lecturing on the inner Earth and the hidden bases and so on and so forth like that. This fellow here, I knew him when he got started, and now he's one of the gurus of the UFO field. He's doing psychic prophecies and everything now. He writes a lot of books and he's a very good lecturer, very articulate guy. He talks a lot about Dulce. He takes people on trips out to Area 51, which I'll get into in a couple of minutes. But first I want to show you some slides of Dulce. Now remember, most people in the UFO field believe that there is a huge, huge government base underneath Dulce that's operated not only by the federal government personnel, military, but also by the ETs, that they're working hand in hand on genetic experiments, so on and so forth. I went and tried to find it, and I couldn't find it. This is the only good building in Dulce. This is the Holiday Inn there. And I went flying by this thing like you can't believe it. I'm doing about 60, 65 miles an hour. Just I got about half mile the other side of town, and we had to turn around and go back. This is the post office in Dulce. This is tribal headquarters of Hickarilla Indian Apache tribe. And the town itself is very, very obviously is poverty-stricken. As I said, the best building in the town, the only place you really want to stay is the hotel. Why did they build a hotel like that in Dulce? Beats me. This is the Dulce Valley. Under this valley is supposed to be a base. This is another shot of the Dulce Valley. If I had loads and loads of money, the one guy I try to prove factual in the UFO field is this guy, Bob Lazar. Bob said he was a scientist working down at Albuquerque, New Mexico for the government, working on jet propulsion and things like that. He left them, went to work in Area 51, which is north of Las Vegas, Nevada. You've seen it on TV. You've seen a lot of programs on TV about it. Bob said that while he was working at Area 51 in a section called S4, he said he walked down a passageway and he saw all these UFOs parked, small craft. So he saw these little seats inside the craft. There were little tiny seats that wouldn't fit you or me. They were made for little tiny human beings. But he said when he left Area 51, he tried to tell his story and he couldn't get it out. The government denied that he ever worked for him down in Los Alamos. What they did is they went back and evidently they destroyed all of his records. So researchers kept going, and some of these guys just don't give up. They found an old telephone book in Los Alamos, and whose name was in the telephone book but Bob Lazar's. Bob Lazar was a good friend of John Lear's. And John Lear is the son of Bill Lear from the Lear jet. And they used to go out to Area 51 all the time, take people out there. This fellow here is Wendell Stevens. Wendell's probably one of the most knowledgeable guys in the UFO field today. He lives in Tucson, Arizona. Wendell investigated the Billy Myers case in Switzerland, which you've seen a lot of the photos sitting over there on the picture boards of the Billy Myers case. Billy Myers case is really up in the air right now. As I said, Wendell's probably one of the most knowledgeable guys in the UFO field today. They tried to shut him up one time. They went after him and tried to convict him of some crimes. Everybody that knew the guy knew that he didn't do them. But they really tried to shut him up, and I think they did in a haphazard way because he's not as active today as he used to be. Bob Brown, this is a very good friend of my wife's and I. He comes to Kansas City quite a bit. He's in the aviation end of, well, you might call it the aviation and the UFO field. He goes out and films air shows and stuff like that. But he also does the UFO research. He holds a conference every year out in Las Vegas. This year it's going to be a little bit north of Las Vegas. It's a 7-day conference. Boy, and it's a long one. My wife and I went to it last year. And he brings everybody that's anybody in the UFO field out there to lecture. He is also a very, very close friend of Wendell Stevens. In fact, Wendell went in cahoots with him on the first UFO conference they had 3 years ago. And Wendell lost $20,000 on it. I don't know what Bob lost. Stanton Friedman. I think he works for the CIA. And a lot of other people in the UFO field think so too. Stanton Friedman claims he's a nuclear physicist. He makes his living on the UFO field, lecturing on UFOs and so on and so forth. Why would a nuclear physicist be doing something about like lecturing on UFOs when he could be practicing in the nuclear field? He's probably one of the best in the UFO field. He goes after the government in a way that the average guy would get his hand slapped for doing it. He goes in gets all these secret documents and things out of Washington and bring them up to the public. This is John Lear. He holds about every record there is for speed flying and so on and so forth like that. He's a very, very sharp guy. However, he's on the outs with Bob Lazar now because he tried to sneak somebody in there at 51 off of information Bob Lazar gave him, so they're not talking. He made a statement to me the last time I talked to him. He says, I'm not a UFO researcher. He said, I'm just in this to make a few bucks. Bill Cooper. If you can find a book, Behold the Pale Horse, go out and buy it. It's going to scare the hell out of you. And this is the second guy I would really check out if I had the time and the money and everything to do it. I've talked to Bill Cooper many, many times, and I told him, I said, you know the only reason I like you? He said, what? I said, your name's almost the same as mine. He said, what do you mean? I said, mine's William Milton Caulfield, yours is William Milton Cooper. He's a very egotistical type guy, but he's got a story that he's going to tell, and I think his story has made him that way. He has built up a shield around him. He says that he was on a Navy ship and saw a UFO come out of the water. saw it go back into the water. By the time the officer of the deck got up, came back out of the water again. He said he's seen many crash ships. He's got involved. He has a secret clearance with the Navy. And it's a long story how he got involved in it. But through his secret clearance, he was able to take and find different documents and things that the government had. And if you read this book, it tells you a lot about them. Even if you don't believe in UFOs, and I'm not pushing the book, I just think it's a good book. Even my wife enjoyed reading that one. He says that the elite of this world, the Rockefellers, so on and so forth, know what's going on, and they know how to handle it. They know what's going to take place. This guy is a very close friend of mine. His name is Guy Kirkwood. When I first met him, he went by the name of Mel Noel, and he used to lecture by the name of Mel Noel. Guy flew out of Salt Lake City years ago in a squadron. The whole task of the squadron was to go out and chase UFOs, do nothing but find them and film them. He said the first several shots they had where they went out, they didn't see a thing. He said one day they went out and they spotted three of these UFOs, and they broke ranks. They come in one on each side of them, and they didn't have gun cameras, they had film cameras on the ships. They took pictures and everything of the UFOs, took them back to the base. They told them to keep their mouths shut. They never saw the film or anything. He later was on another trip. This was after several trips and nothing happened. And they again spotted some UFOs, and he said a voice came through on his radio. And he said he knew it was a squadron commander talking to this entity on this UFO. He said why he knew it. He said he just knew it. And they were telling him about things that were going to happen, so on and so forth. And he said it scared the squadron commander so much that when he got back to the base, he resigned from the U.S. Air Force. He said he still converses with him today. He said the guy's still scared to death. UFO Magazine, which is one of the most popular UFO magazines out today, did a chop job on Guy, which I thought was very, very unfair. I know most of what there is to know about Guy from what he's told me and everything, but they said that he was a fake and so on and so forth, and they had no proof of it. Alan Hynek, he was the one that ran the Center for UFO Studies up at the University of Northwestern. One night I took a fellow up to Northwestern University to be interviewed by Dr. Hynek. He had hidden tape recorders in the room, which I didn't know at the time. It kind of burned me up. But then I got over it. Hynek, until the day he died, was trying to prove UFOs were real. He was one of the real true scientists, and he used to work for the U.S. Air Force when UFOs first came out. And his total job with the U.S. Air Force was to debunk UFOs. Al Bielek. How many of you ever seen the Philadelphia experiment on TV? That's where the ship was transported from one place to another through time. Well, they got Philadelphia 2 coming out now. Al Bielek was one of the people, he said he was on the old Eldridge and was transferred through time when they hit the switches and so on and so forth. Supposedly there's only one other fella that was on the Eldridge that's alive. His name is Cummings or something like that, I can't remember right now, and I've never met him. But a year ago, a little less than a year ago, I was at a conference out on the West Coast, and I met a fella named Andy Strom. Andy told me, he said, Bill, he said, I was on the Eldridge. And I said, Andy, you couldn't have been on the Eldridge. I said, how old are you? He said, 42. I said, the Eldridge took place 51 years ago. He said, Bill, I was on the Eldridge. And I said, well, tell me a story. He said, I can't tell you now. He said, I'm going to release it before too long. I got a letter from him about 10 days ago, and he said, Bill, I'm finally going public with my story. And he gave me a few of the highlights. He said he was a senior scientist on the Eldridge, that he placed a lot of the equipment on the Eldridge, that he went through the time experiment. I hope you get a tape from him any time telling what happened to him, why he's only 42 years old now instead of 77 or 78. And again, you meet Andy, just as nice as can be. He's like your next door neighbor. This fellow here, he's been over here before and talked, Mark Davenport. Mark lives down in Mississippi now. He wrote a book, Visitors from Time. And he believes that these ETs are coming through time, and he's very possibly right. He's probably hit it closer than anyone. The only thing, and I've said this several times, the problem I have with time is my dad was born in 1900. If I go through time back to 1890, my dad wasn't born. That means I can't be there. And there's a lot of conversation going on in this UFO field, why this happens and everything. This is the book that Mark Davenport wrote, Visitors from Time. It's interesting reading. This is Walt Andrus. Walt Andrus runs MUFON, Mutual UFO Network. It's the biggest UFO organization in the world today. They have directors and assistant directors and that throughout the world, offices throughout the world, yet they only have 5,000 members. They should have 500,000 members. It's very possible, a lot of people in the UFO field think that it's government-backed. May not be. They hold a conference every year down in, well, they had their big conference last year. This year they had in Austin, Texas, and the year before they had in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But they have smaller MUFON conferences around the country. I don't think MUFON's going to solve the UFO story unless they change their policies. That's a copy of the MUFON journal that they put out. It says the truth about the UFO crash at Roswell. The biggest thing today in UFO talk is the crash at Roswell. More and more is coming out on it. They're trying to get, there's a congressman from New Mexico that's trying to get the government to release information on it now. I don't think he's going to succeed. They just don't let the information out. I think the Navy's the one that's hush-hushing everything up as far as UFOs go. This is Tim Beckley. Tim is, today in the UFO field, it's called Mr. UFO. He always wears those dark shades. The last time I saw him. Now the guy is a very common sense guy, but he's a flake. He had purple and red hair and black on the other side. And he was at a UFO conference that he was running. It's his UFO conference. He publishes 5 or 6 different magazines out of New York on UFOs. Probably the biggest publisher in the UFO field today. And in fact, I'm going to speak at his conference in September out in Phoenix. I like it. His conferences are probably the best conferences out for one simple reason. Everybody comes out of the woodwork. You know, you get some of these conferences that are just dry and kind of boring. You hate to sit there for 8-10 hours a day. Or you go to Beckley's and they're pretty lively. I enjoy them. Maybe they're not all there, but this is one of the magazines UFO University publishes. This is another one, Inner Light. UFO sightings. This fellow here, Antonio Nunez, they call him Tony, he writes for Fate magazine. He's on the lecture circuit all the time, telling the UFO stories. And Fate magazine is a good one to take and get UFO stories out of. Here's a copy of Fate magazine. It's one of the oldest magazines out. It has a lot of psychic material in it. I've always said if you believe in psychic phenomena, it's an easy way to break yourself. Go to Fate magazine, go to the back pages, they have advertisement on 3 questions answered for $10. Take 5 of them, send 15 different questions out, and believe me, none of your answers that you get back are going to match. This is Lou Parrish. Lou runs the Eureka Springs, Arkansas conference every year in April. If you want to go down and have some fun next year, he'll hold a conference down in Eureka Springs, Arkansas. It'll be on a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Usually starts Friday night and ends Sunday at noon. You meet a lot of people, a lot of nice people. You meet a few that are, you know, you're not sure of. But my wife and I go to this every year. It's just a beautiful area down there in Eureka Springs. And it's not too far of a drive. It costs you usually about $30, $35 for the whole weekend, plus your hotel. And I'm not promoting this conference either. I just think it's a good one to go to. There's the lobby at Eureka Springs, some of the things they have set up in the lobbies. Here's Ray Palmer. Again, this ties in with something that we were talking about before. Ray is dead now, but he used to put out Search magazine. Years ago when he was putting out Search magazine, and it's still out today, his wife was putting it out, now she just sold it to somebody else. They had a fellow by the name of Shaver, and he was putting in a publication in the magazine every month called the Shaver Mystery. And it talked about Deros and Teros, little entities that came out of the earth, and they weren't the best little creatures alive. But ironic, isn't it? And this here was back in the 40s and 50s. So is that what we're dealing with today, some of those things? This is front of Search magazine. This is a late edition of it too, the front. Now I'm going to tell you another story that you flat won't believe. This guy is an evangelist minister. This is his younger days. He has gray hair now and he's a little heavier, like all of us when we get 60 and 70. Frank Stranges, I've known him for 35 years. I like the guy. In the UFO field, there's a joke behind Frank's back. A lot of them call him Dr. Weird, which I don't think is fair. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story, but if the stories about the other fellows like George Adamski and Orpheus Lucy and Dan Fry and all of them are fact, Frank Strange's story is fact. That's at least the way I believe in things. There's very few people that I know of in the UFO field that believe his story. They think he's an opportunist, so on and so forth. But he's an evangelist, and he gets up on the podium and you know he's an evangelist. He said that years ago, and I can't even remember the year right now, that he met a fellow in the Pentagon by the name of Al Thor from the planet Venus, who lives in the center of the planet Venus, not inside the Venus, not on the surface. He said that he was told to go to the Pentagon, told how to get into the Pentagon, just show a card and just keep walking and so on and so forth. And he wound up talking to this person called Al Thor. Now you have to remember, he's an evangelist minister, so evidently these entities, when they talk, I noticed when they talk to Buck Nelson, they talk to him like a farmer. And they talk to somebody else as a doctor, and they talk to him like a doctor. And they talked to Frank like he was a minister, and that they were on the same wavelength with him. They told him about what was taking place on the planet Earth, so on and so forth, and they were here to help, and so on and so forth there. I don't know whether I met Frank's first wife when he was married, and he'd gotten divorced, and I was at a conference about a year ago, a little over a year ago. And I had somebody tap me on the shoulder, and I turned around. She says, "Remember me?" And I said, "No, I can't." Oh, yeah. I said, Bernice, yeah. I said, "You're Frank Strange's ex-wife, right?" She said, "Yeah." So we got talking. We sat there in the lobby for a few minutes. I asked her, I said, "Do you mind if I ask you something?" She said, "No." I said, "Do you believe Frank's story?" I said, "You were married to him." I said, "You should know more than anybody else, all the years that you lived with him." She said, "Bill, I really don't know." And she was leveling with me. So again, are the pre-1960s true? You know, or all these things that after these guys true? I'll tell you a story here about a doctor that I think, and I know there's a doctor in the audience tonight that might appreciate this. This guy's name is Stephen Greer. He runs the CSETI organization, Center for Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He's on the trauma unit of a hospital in North Carolina. You might have seen him on TV here about a month or so ago, where they were out chasing UFOs, and they finally wound up and they saw the headlights of his truck, and they thought that was what they thought was a UFO. He didn't come out too well on the program, to be honest with you. At least I didn't think he did. They go out at night in groups and try to conjure up contact with ETs through mental maneuvering or different things that they, anyway, you know the old making sounds, so on and so forth. I think it's dangerous. I think they're going to get their contact, and they may get something they can't handle. I don't want any ET to contact me. That's the last thing I want. But if you met Stephen Greer, you'd like the guy. Very, very intelligent guy. You know, he's no dummy. People just get caught up in certain things in life today, and they just keep going on them. And then who knows, maybe he was the one who's going to get the answer. This is Brad Steiger and his wife Sherry Steiger. They write loads and loads of books on UFOs and all sorts of psychic phenomena, esoteric type things. Probably everybody in this room has read their book at one time. Very nice couple. They came to our house one time. We lived in Chicago. And I read an article years later, and he said, well, he says, I can't remember the guy's name or anything, but I was at a house in Chicago one night. He said, the guy's house I was at was a walk-in. He was referring to me. I don't know where I walked in from, but... UFO Magazine, run by Vicki Cooper and Don Ecker. These are the ones that I thought did the chop job on Mel Noel. I think it's CIA controlled, and a lot of people in the UFO field think it's CIA controlled. I think we need to change that. I want to show you some foreign UFOs now, just not a lot of them, but and tell you a couple stories about them. I think I am. You got that in there? Oh, I see. Okay, I was jump ahead of you. In the last batch of UFOs I showed you were all American. These are all foreign UFOs. This one was taken over Japan back in 1958. This was taken in Japan the same year. That one was taken in France. This one was taken by a Peruvian customs inspector. You can see the smoke coming out the back. I really don't think it's a UFO. This was taken in Malaga, Spain. This one was taken in South Africa, a dome-shaped ship. And there's two more slides to it. This one and this one. This is Cedric Gallingham. He said he took this shot from 500 feet away from this bell-safe ship. Remember the old Dansky ship? You can see a similarity, but not totally the same. Here's another ship of us from a different angle. And that's the same ship going off into space. Elizabeth Keller, again, South Africa, back in 1956. She took the pictures of these ships here. A lot of these photos, I'm going fast through them because a lot of these photos are over there on the picture boards so you can see them better. Let me tell you a little story about Elizabeth Keller. She later, after she took all these photographs, made contact with the UFOs. One of the entities came to Earth. They got married, had children. The gal is an extremely educated woman, very credible in her place where she lives in South Africa. She went through a lot of ridicule over it. This is Billy Myers. Billy Myers is from Switzerland. This is probably one of the present-day contacts where the contact that they make is a person that looks like you or me. He made a contact with a person called Sem Hassi. He got so infatuated with this Sem Hassi that it was unbelievable. If you ever read the stories that he tells about it, you can tell it very obviously. But Billy Myers didn't play it fair. If his story is true, and he's going through a lot of credibility problems right now with his story, whether it's true or not, he would try to sneak people out in the fields when they tell him to come out that they'd let him take pictures. He'd try to sneak people out there and hide them in the bushes or something. They knew that they were there. They got a little upset with him. He said over the years that he was taking pictures of these discs, that hundreds of the photos that he took were stolen from him. He never got them back. Wendell Stevens was the one that was the original promoter of all these UFO pictures. In fact, when he went to Switzerland, he came back by Kansas City, stopped at our house to talk to us about them. There's a pretty good shot of one. There's one almost on the ground. The Talmud of Emmanuel. this will probably destroy Billy Meyer's story more than any one thing out. He said that they found some scrolls, biblical scrolls, and they've had them reproduced into German and English. You buy this book here, the Old Talmud Manual, and one side of the page is written in German, and the other side is written in English. It tells about things in the Bible, how they happen, and basically along the same lines that our present thinking is in the Bible, with just little variations to it. Crop circles, I don't get into a lot, and I don't for the simple reason that I don't know if they're really connected with the UFO field. They may and they may not be. This lady here is Linda Moulton Howe. She's in cattle mutilations. She's written most of the books that come out in cattle mutilations. She went up to Colorado and investigated all those cases up there. And again, same thing with this crop circles, cattle mutilations. I really don't study them a lot because it could be a cult thing going on. They think it's not because of the laser type cuts that they have in these cattle and the different circles that are made in the cattle and the whole section of the body removed, so on and so forth. But one thing they got into in the UFO field the last year or so is these black helicopters. Every time there's cattle mutilations around, they find black helicopters around. There's a black helicopter base down in Mississippi today. And that's fact, that's not fiction. And all these black helicopters down there have no markings on them. And it's the one base in the United States today where they're keeping them. Maybe they are on a special research program for the United States government, I don't know. This is George Wingfield. He's the guy that does a lot of cattle, or crop circles. Colin Andrews, he's probably the best known person in the world. He lives in England on crop circle. You probably all heard about the crop circles that these guys said they made with the sticks and that, walking around cropping them. No way. They'd have to two-shoe it all the way across the country, about 10,000 miles an hour to make crop circles the way they've been made. I'm going to talk a little bit about UFO conferences because I think they affect the UFO field today. This here is an ET mask table where they sell masks of ETs. You can slip it over your head, you know, like they do these other rubber masks. There's David Ransdell. David and his brother put out the UFO Library with a guy who's got one of the masks on. And there's that ET again. Wouldn't you like to wake up and have something like this sitting like that as your bed? I'm against things like this for one simple reason. It's not gaining the UFO field any knowledge. This is a T-shirt display at the Eureka Springs UFO conference. This is a doll display where they're selling dolls at the conference in Eureka Springs. Hey, these things are fine, you know, in a novelty store someplace, but not at the UFO conference. This is a guy, say from Arabia someplace, that's selling coffee cups and gems and stones and so on and so forth. This guy from Lincoln, Nebraska, nice guy, he dressed up as a man, one of the men in black, and wore the dark glasses and horsing around. This is Ray Boshi. Ray talks a lot about the men in black. He knows quite a bit about them. This here was at a conference they had in LA at one of the major hotels in Los Angeles. You walk into the conference, and as soon as you walk in this big display room, here's these three guys under mind control. Great, great, great for the average guy walking in off the street. He thinks you're a bunch of flakes. At the conference out at Expo West, here a couple of months ago, I was sitting out in the lobby with a woman, commercial photographer, and we were talking here. Up the escalator comes Jay Leno. He had a camera crew with him. So he walked over by the side by the elevators, and I said, come on, let's just go see what Jay's doing. And I found out that the guys that were running the conference would not let him into the display room. Dumb move. That's what he needed to film. But he interviewed about 15, 20 people there in the lobby of the hotel. And you can't believe how these people wanted to get on that program. And you know, he's got a comedy show, and he wanted something that was comical. And people want to get on there serious, and they want to sell their books. And so I was talking, in fact, I was talking to this commercial photographer with me. I said, you got your camera loaded? She said, yeah. I said, take my picture when I tell you to. She said, wait a minute, just take my picture when I tell you. And I walk up and says, hey, Jay, shake my hand. He shook my hand. She took the picture. I got it at home. This little book here says that 1 in 50 people in the world have been abducted. Now, where can they get a figure? I really don't believe it. I think they had to pull that clean right out of the air. That's called the Roper Report. Now I want to talk to you about what I think is going on and kind of get down to the end of this thing here. And I'm going to tell you what I think the government's doing. And I can be wrong, okay? And everything I'm going to say from here on out, I can be wrong, but I think this is an educated guess from what I've learned. I'm going to talk to you what I think about the ETs, about the public. I'm going to look at a few ideas. Again, I may be right and I may be wrong. I think the government's position today, I think the government is caught up in a fantastic maze. They don't know how to get out of it. They've told so many lies, done so many things that they keep getting caught up in this thing, and if they come out with it now, they're going to look like a bunch of bouffons. I think the effects on religion and economics, if this was released by the U.S. government, would be, I don't think it would be, but I think the government thinks that. I think they feel that they'd have people jumping off tall buildings and so on and so forth over their religion or the economical collapse this would probably cause. I think that they're out there trying to cover up their mistakes. And believe me, they've made a lot of them. I think they've made deals with ETs. Now, most people say, what do you mean, our government make deals with ETs? Yes. If the UFO story is true, and Dulcie's true, then the government's got deals going with ETs. I think that they were conned into these deals. They got so far into them that they don't know how to get out of them. Otherwise, the ETs use the government. I think that they were betrayed by the ETs, that they have no control over the actions of the ETs. The ETs do what they want. I think there's many government positions, and very possible in Washington, D.C., and this sounds like a stupid statement, but I think that there's a lot of people that are being infiltrated by mind control. If abductions can be infiltrated with mind control, they can do it in Washington or any place else on this planet. I don't think the government is sure whether they're good or bad. I think they're making a lot of guesses. I think the government fears of an invasion, even though the government probably knows about the Admiral Byrd thing in the center of the earth. I think that they still have a fear of this invasion. I think they have a fear of what the public will do. I think the public is in danger today because of the ET situation. If it wasn't, what are these ETs going to do? Just get up and leave us one of these days? Say goodbye, hey, we had fun down there putting everybody under hypnosis and so on and so forth? I don't think so. And I think we as citizens of this country have a right to know, and I think it's time for the government to release it to us. Hey, if you take a look at the attitude of the ETs and their actions, and if you want to say they're good, fine. You know, maybe I'm a minority in the UFO field today where I say I don't think they're that great. I know a lot of people say, oh, you're negative about the ETs, you're negative. Well, I'd rather be negative, you know, walk away from it than not be negative and have somebody bite my head off. I think that the ET is very indifferent to us. They don't communicate with us verbally on these abductions. They want to control every aspect of what they do. They operate against our free will. They always operate in the dark. Why don't they come out at 9 o'clock in the morning and abduct somebody? Why 2 o'clock in the morning? It's always a covert operation that they have. Practically everything that's connected with abductions today is covert. And people today say that's good. Not in my book. They use the implants on abductees. They create trauma in most of your abductees. And mind control is beyond belief how they're using it. They blank out their memories, and they're using the American people as well as people around the world for guinea pigs. Now, if you look at the appearance of the ETs, we have slanty eyes, pointed ears, huge heads, long arms. They're monkey-like arms. Small bodies, no mouth to speak of. Do they eat? Nobody's ever seen them eating. They're gray in color, and they have a sulfur smell. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And you have the reptilian types, just like Leah Haley said that there's a reptilian type contact here. Doesn't a lot of this remind you of the old stories of the demons we heard when we were kids? It does me. I remember some of the dreams we used to have. There's Mom and Pop. And you think, really, that these are going to be your neighbors in the year 2001? Do you think that your kids are going to be out playing with their children? I don't. I think that we have to take and use our imagination a little bit on this kind of stuff. And some other things that are not going to sound really kosher, but I'm going to say them anyway. And this is a guess and only a guess what I think. I think that the ETs are being kicked out of space. In the Bible it says there's been a war in the heavens going on for thousands of years. Could this be the war? Could good ETs be kicking the bad ETs out? It says the final battle is going to be fought here on Earth. Is that why they're building bases down here? Is this why they're implanting people to build up an army? Most people, in fact, in the UFO field think that the ETs are crashing, or that they're going through a thunderstorm or something that crashed, like the Roswell thing. They think it crashed down the road. Well, you don't come light years out of the universe into our atmosphere and crash because of a thunderstorm. They're either being shot down by U.S. Air Force pilots, or they're being shot down by their own other ETs. And I think they're being shot down a lot by their other ETs. I've got a story that a guy told me one time about this that happened to him. It's unbelievable. I don't have time to go into it tonight. One of these days I'll tell it to you. I think that the ETs are here to take over the planet. I don't think there's any place left for them in outer space. I think they're building these bases down here, and they're building an army with implants, and they're going to use mind control to control it. And maybe it's the final battle for Earth, whatever that is. And if the Roper report that says there's 1 in 50 people on this planet, and I don't believe it necessarily, but it's out there, so I thought I'd tell you, have been implanted. Can you imagine the army that would make if somebody at a certain time wanted to activate all these implants and say, hey, you do my will? I think that the ETs are using us, and I think that they can fool the best of you, the best minds out. I don't think they're benevolent, but I think they're dangerous. I don't think they're all-powerful because they make mistakes. They've had implants that they put in people that come out, so on and so forth. What you should do if you have an ET contact. First thing, don't have an ET contact. If you want to prove to yourself that ETs are fact, or good or bad, or whatever you want to say, just do a profile or evaluation. Make up a sheet, put good on one side, bad on the other side, and draw a line down the middle. And everything that these ETs do in an abduction, put on one side or the other. You're going to find out they all come up on the bad side. Anybody, even the percentages, we deal with different percentages, I won't even hit that. I tell people all the time to protect yourself, avoid ET contacts, deal on your terms. Don't put the ETs on a pedestal, though they don't belong on a pedestal. Treat them all as dangerous. Walk away from them, or in fact, run away from them. If you have to, fight if necessary. There's people have been contacted by ETs that have fought and won. The ETs leave them. Take a swing at them. And above all, don't ask for an ET contact. A lot of the people in the UFO field, they disagree with the things I've just told you about ETs. They think I'm wrong in saying it. But I would rather take and treat all ETs as bad and have them come up good. If I treat them all as good and they come up bad, where can I be? I can be caught up in the whole mess. And to prove that you're all normal, here's an article that came out in the Kansas City Star a few weeks back. It says those people who report UFOs are normal. And even Garfield had a contact with ETs. These are just some books that I thought you might want to read. UFOs in the New Age and UFO End-Time Delusion. If any of you want to write those names down, you have to remember that they're religious type atmosphere books, but you should read them to get the other side of it. You don't have to believe it. Behold it. That's Behold the Pale Horse by Bill Cooper. I think it's a good reading. Taken by Carla Turner. I won't get into the story because it's a long involved thing. UFO Library Magazine, there's a bunch of them out there on the table that you can buy if you want. It's going to be the biggest UFO publication in the world today. They're out right now, about 75,000 copies are printing. And with that, take me to your leader. And we'll go have a 5-minute break here, and then we'll just go in. In fact, we can just go in questions and answers. You can just walk around if you want, or as we have the question and answers, okay? Well, what I'd like to know, did you learn anything about ETs? Nobody learned anything? Makes you think, though, doesn't it?
We'll take a 5 or 10 minute break and come back for questions. Thank you. All sorts of views as to what the origins are, and it's still a big mystery, whatever it is. And hopefully tonight we've come away with a little bit more of understanding of what's happening. I'd like to open up the mic to Mr. Caulfield for questions and answers.
Who's going to give the first question? Hey, believe me, there's a lot of questions I can't answer, but I'll try to tell you if I can't.
What first got you interested in the field of UFO research?
I was with the commercial airline down in Roswell, New Mexico, back in 1949. And a guy, Army officer down there, told me a story about UFOs that were taken to Wright-Patterson, about little entities that were taken back to Wright-Patterson. And in those days, I wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. You know, I was about your age, had more fun than anything. But it stirred my interest, and after a while, I moved out of Roswell and moved over to El Paso and just kept moving around the country. And as I went around the country, I started picking up information on and studying it. I don't recommend anybody get into the field, believe me. Most people think you're going to get in the UFO field and get rich. There's only half a dozen people that I know of in the whole UFO field that really made any money on it. Bud Hopkins is one. Even the ones that write the books, you don't make any money on a UFO book.
I want to make a comment to clarify a couple points you made regarding hypnosis, so recovering memory, abduction. I'll just briefly mention I'm working on a Facebook called and I've done some research related to hypnosis. And I think what you presented is one side of the story, that certainly there's a lot of stuff being done that's kind of there's also a great deal of credible work being done related to hypnosis and memory, and I just wanted to mention that. But more importantly, something I wanted to mention was that the analogy that you drew to the so-called false memory syndrome related to sexual abuse is really quite inappropriate. It's an entirely different situation. There's no
Well, as a favor to you, I won't bring it up next time, okay? All I was trying to do is tie the two in together, that you get the same type of thinking, you know. Otherwise, imagination can work in both fields. You don't agree?
There is a great deal of research to suggest, there is no credible research to suggest that memories of sexual abuse are false. There's a great deal of reason to believe that the incidence of sexual abuse is much greater than what is reported. So if you have data to support what you're claiming, that's fine. If you don't, it's probably preferable not to mention it.
Okay, I have a tendency to agree with you. You know, when you talk like this, you say a lot of things that maybe you're not right about. Who's got another question?
You mentioned at the end of the tape you made this strange recording from the Ashtar Command, where it was supposed to be from the Ashtar Command appearing mysteriously at the end of the tape.
Yeah.
But you didn't mention what was said. Could you elaborate a little bit?
Well, all it said, it was about a 3-minute tape, and it said that he wished, you know, joy to the people of Earth and so on and so forth, and wish we'd straighten our life out and so on, stuff like that. It was a very gentle type message is all. Nothing really serious, wasn't telling you any good prophecies or anything like that.
Have any of these implants been removed and studied?
They're studying some of them right now. The implants have fallen out of people. They're so small that you can hardly see them. But there's some people that are working on them. I can't think who it was right off the top of my head that's studying the implants right today. But they are studying them.
Has there been any evidence of sexual trauma with abductees?
Sexual trauma?
In hospitals or anything like that?
Well, I don't follow you. How you mean sexual trauma? You mean that relating to the experience itself?
Yeah, like the alligator woman. Any
No, she doesn't seem to be affected by it. And I know her very well. Of course, I don't know. This just recently happened to her, just in the last few months. And to what degree this her contact or abduction took place, I don't know.
Where have the implants been located? What various places have they been found?
Well, most implants, they go up through your nose, and they usually wind up in here someplace, or they go up through your ear, they've gone through your mouth. But there's been implants that been put in other parts of the body too. The thing I think about an implant is they've had cases where they've fallen out. It means one thing to me: these ETs are not perfect.
What other parts of the body have they been found in?
Well, they've been found in their legs, in their abdomen. Anybody else?
Well, you said a couple things that don't seem kind of inconsistent to me, where you talked about the UFO crashes, and you said, well, if they're going to fly through space all the way here, then it seems unlikely that they're going to crash on the planet. But why not? But on the other hand, you say, well, they're imperfect. They make implants that fall out. Well, if they put implants in people that fall out, why can't they crash? I mean, flying through...
Well, hey, they could crash. I said I just don't think that's the reason for their crashing.
Yeah.
No, I think that I think it's just two different stories there. The implants is totally different from when they're operating their craft.
I mean, isn't flying around the planet a lot more difficult than just flying through space?
Very possible.
In space, basically, except a bunch of vacuum. Going through space is pretty easy. Navigating in an atmosphere around the planet is a difficult thing.
Well, I've been in the air a lot, okay?
Yeah.
I don't think that there's a pilot in this country that's going to take intentionally to get caught, especially with the knowledge that we have today on weather, stuff like that's going to get caught in a thunderstorm and crash. That's my philosophy why I don't think ETs are going to have one of their craft come down and get caught in a thunderstorm. It's possible. Who's kidding who? Anything's possible, but it's fairly impractical.
Well, I mean, not just thunderstorms, but just something goes wrong with the ship or, something like that, a mechanical failure. Could happen anyway.
Well, if we ever got a hold of one of those things, we've got to...
Out in space, you never know. If they crash here on Earth, and presumably they should be found.
Well, hey, there's so many theories on this out there that it's unbelievable. That you just don't have answers for all of it.
How common is it for encounters of the first kind, like in Kansas City, Phoenix, Lawrence area?
How common is it? I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
How many, is there very many reports of people seeing UFOs in this area?
Well, they claim there are. If you take a look at the UFO, back in '88, they had in the United States they had about 1,000 UFO reports every year.
I'm talking about.
Well, if you take and break that down, it spreads all over the country about it. Most of it's on the West Coast and the East Coast. According to the people in Kansas City that really track these things, they say there's quite a few in Kansas City. The thing that amazes me is I've been in this UFO field for all these years now. I've never seen a UFO. The closest I ever come to seeing a UFO, one night we were making an approach when we first started flying jets in this country back in 59, 60. We were making an approach at O'Hare Airport. We were in Joliet, Illinois, and I was sitting in the jump seat back of the captain. And a big blue fireball came right down in front of the jet. And Pete turned around, looked at me, he said, "Billy," he said, "look at that meteor go down there." And I said, "Yeah." We kept flying on in for our approach at O'Hare Airport. And here goes the other way. I said, "Pete, there goes that fireball the other way." That's the closest I've ever come to seeing a UFO. I know people who see these things all the time. How many in here have seen a UFO? Well, there's a good percentage for you, people seeing UFOs. I get people all the time that come up and say, "I saw a UFO the other night." But you get to the point that you read so much on this and you get so much in your mind about UFO contacts, you can't remember all of them, so you have a tendency to take and say, I get interesting letters like that. I got that letter about the FDR in the mail here a few days ago, which is amazing. That's the kind of letters I like to see on the UFO phenomena because you got witnesses to back it up. I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Can you say more about the trauma instead of the people?
Well, I'll give you one example. There's a lot of people in the UFO field that wound up divorced because of their UFO contacts. I can mention some names you people would recall. That people in studying the UFO field have met abductees, have married the abductees. I know one fellow very, very well that broke up with his wife. Very nice, charming lady. Broke up with her and going with this their abductee now. The trauma that's created between these people is unbelievable. You have people that just can't maneuver in society today because of the trauma, because of an ET abduction. Of course, I think a lot of that is because of the people themselves, too. Some people can handle things, some people can't handle it.
Yes, you've presented this ET experience and phenomenon in a very negative light and have implied that it's a very dangerous situation that we're dealing with here. And you have portrayed the aliens as possibly being negative or having some kind of a dark purpose. But there are a lot of people in this world who are bad people who do bad things, but that doesn't mean that the whole human race is bad or evil. Now, wouldn't that be the same with the ETs? You know, just
well,
some bad ETs, does that mean they're all bad? And secondly, if their purpose was to conquer the Earth, with their technology, couldn't they do that?
Possibly, but I don't think so.
Why wouldn't they do that if they had the technology? That's their purpose.
Well, maybe they don't have that kind of technology. Maybe they don't have the numbers to do it. I know a lot of people say if the ETs are here for that purpose, so they can take us over between breakfast and lunch. It's possible. I know a lot of people, and I told you when I was talking that I have a negative attitude against ETs, and I do, for one simple reason. If I go out to people and I take and tell them, hey, ETs are benevolent, they're good, 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 and everybody believes this and they're not good, can you imagine what's going to happen? Here in 10 years, you're going to have a lot of people believing all these ETs are good when they're bad, so I would rather operate with the idea, and maybe I do sound negative because of that, I would rather operate with the fact that I think they're bad and if they turn out good, fine. But I want them to prove that to me. Right now, if there's good ETs out there, they better get with the program because they're letting the bad ETs take over everything. That's my philosophy. And all I say is go out and look up all the abduction cases and you'll prove it to yourself. Just evaluate them.
Do you contend that some of these ETs didn't take on human form of some kind or what?
Well, if you can melt through a wall, if I can take and come into a room and pick you up and suck you right through the wall with me, I guess you can take and do a lot of things. And that's the abilities they have. You know, we really don't know a lot about the ETs today. We don't know a lot about the abductions. And I could get up here and talk, and I could take and make 1,000 different statements, and necessarily all 1,000 could be wrong. Everything we're doing on the ET and abduction field today is guesswork. Do you agree with that?
That's all guesswork? No.
Have you ever been abducted?
Yes.
I figured. Well, see, I found this out too. Anybody that's been abducted by an ET will look at it different than I do.
I haven't read the book, started a cult, or anything else. And I really, it really upsets me that you would imply that abductees and contactees are flakes or after...
Now, I didn't say your contactees or abductees were flakes.
The implication...
No, because I don't believe that. I believe that you have people that are out there that are abductees. I met a lot of abductees, okay? Practically everyone I met are nice, nice people. I like them, sincerely, and I've said that here tonight. I said that many times that the people I've met in the UFO field that have contacts and things like this, they're somebody that you really, really like. Because that's the way it works. Maybe that's why they're contacted, because they're such nice people. I don't know.
We have only time for a couple more questions. Then we'd like to encourage everyone to sign up on the mailing list outside. Thank you.
How do you know you're an abductee? And do any abductees come back and tell what happens and the experiences they had and do what it does?
Well, let's go from this. I don't want to put you on the spot, okay? How do you tell that you're an abductee? That's this gentleman's question. You can answer it better than I can.
I remember the experience, partially.
What experiences would that be?
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you more, too. Who else got a question?
Are you familiar with the book Witness?
Yeah.
In that book, it implies that the little gray people use humans for surrogate mothers because they're unable to give birth to their own kind. And human mothers are used.
Well, that goes back with the idea that the abductees today, the ETs, are using a lot of these abductees for genetic experiments. This is Christy Chilton's philosophy that what they were doing down in Dulce was genetic experiments. A lot of your abductee females have had their eggs taken from them. From men, they take the sperm. The women later on have been shown little babies that said that they were their babies. So.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming on tonight. Pleasant drinks. Everyone, please sign up outside. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you for coming.